Hello and welcome to Paul on Politics. Well, bonfire night may have passed, but there's been no shortage of political fireworks this week, dominated of course by the election of a reality TV star with curious hair to the highest public office in the land. Closer to home, the domestic political agenda continues to be centred on that challenging, not to say awkward issue of Brexit and how and when the UK will extricate itself from its membership of the EU. Even before that happens, the government is confronting a legal ruling that says MPs must be able to vote on the terms of any deal. With me on the sofa to discuss this and other issues are the Sittingbourne and Sheppey Conservative MP Gordon Henderson, a vocal supporter of Brexit, and the senior Labour County Councillor Roger Truelove. Thanks to both of them for coming in. But first, is the government going to get its way with controversial plans for more grammar schools, a key pledge of Prime Minister Theresa May? Popular with some, but loathed by others, the policy is coming up against some fierce political resistance. MPs began an examination this week of the plans. Duarte Diaz reports.
Theresa May's plans to introduce a new wave of grammar schools has triggered the age-old debate over the pros and cons of grammar school education. Grammar schools were introduced with the Education Act of 1944 alongside secondary modern schools. In Kent, we have more grammar schools than most areas in the UK, accounting for 33 of 163 in England. Children are selected for grammar schools according to the Kent test that they take at the age of 11. A test that Kent Education Network disagreed with. Dr. Alan Bainbridge, a senior lecturer at the Canterbury Christchurch University School of Childhood and Educational Studies, is an affiliate of this network.
I think the whole notion of testing someone's aptitude at the age of 10, I think it's a little bit silly actually. It doesn't make sense. There is no evidence that it's accurate and that it works. And as I said, I don't think it makes sense as far as, is this something we want to do to young people at the age of 10? To give them a test over a couple of hours, to now put them into different buildings with different peers to follow different careers from the age of 10. I don't think this makes sense at all.
2 years ago, Sevenoaks Grammar School managed to work around legislation that prevented it from building new grammar schools by planning to build an annex instead, and construction started this year. The desire to get children to pass the test has led to a whole network of paid institutions advertising high Kent test pass rates. Peter Reid is an independent education advisor that supports families who has worked in Kent's education system for 43 years.
I loathe tutoring, but I would advise that some tutoring takes place, but not to the extent that it's happening in this county. Do you realise that there are some children who are tutored from the age of 5 to get into a grammar school? It's madness and totally unnecessary. Of course, the elephant in the room is private education, because if there weren't grammar schools, the private sector would expand to meet the need and the demand from parents for a selective education, and the chasm between state and private education would grow. We can already see how leaders from private education are starting to dominate more and more this country's affairs.
However, what Dr. Bainbridge and Mr. Reid both agree is that this debate is just a smokescreen for a much larger and detrimental issue affecting not only schools in Kent, but all across the United Kingdom. Duarte Diaz reporting for KMTV.
Well, Gordon Henderson, we know you're a vocal supporter of grammar schools, but what is the problem that more grammar schools is going to fix? Why is there a need for them?
I'm not sure that we need more grammar schools. I just support the ones we've already got. I think that it was touched on during that snap there that if we don't have grammar schools, you're just going to see an expansion of private schooling. And the problem in our country has always been that people with wealth have always been able to provide their children with a very, very good education. Now, I'm a working class boy from a council estate in Chatham who never had an opportunity to go to a private school. I did have an opportunity to go to a grammar school, but unfortunately I didn't pass my 11 plus. And so I went to a secondary modern school. And that's where I slightly agree with one of the contributors there, and that was that I'm not sure that having an examination at 10 for children and then that's it is the right answer. I think what we should be doing is, I'm a great believer in grammar schools, but I'd like to see an opportunity for children at 11, 12 and 13 as they mature and as they develop to actually then transfer into that grammar school.
Sounds like you're not totally on the same page as Theresa May to me, Gordon.
No, I think that no, I think that the proposals, as I understand it, that are going to be put forward in a white paper, will include that as an option. That there will be an opportunity for children that don't pass their 11 plus to actually transfer to grammar schools at a later date. And I think that's right. I mean, I had an opportunity eventually to transfer to Rochester Maths School when I was 16, by which time it was far too late. I'd have liked to have been able to transfer at 12 or 13.
Roger Truelove, we know Labour is not terribly keen on this, isn't it? It's a bit of old-fashioned class war you're waging.
No, it's certainly not. The Theresa May announcement is just a sort of ridiculous diversion from the incredibly important educational issues that we do have to deal with. We have a shortage of teachers, we have a shortage of places. We need to do a lot about the curriculum in the secondary education sector for vocational education. And this has just been brought up because it pleases backbenchers in the Conservative Party, and it's also a bit of a barrier to UKIP because they dine out on grammar schools.
So what's Labour's alternative vision then?
Well, the alternative vision is to get on with running the education system in this country properly.
You obviously feel that grammar school is not the way forward, but
No.
But we know schools stream already. Why not? If you accept schools streaming, why
Well,
not?
take Gordon's example that he went to a secondary modern school. At 11, it would be impossible to tell what his curriculum needs might be at 16. He might have been very good at languages, but
I wasn't.
But you may have been. You may have had aptitudes which a test at 11 couldn't have possibly described. And this happens to a lot of youngsters, that they have a talent. It cannot be detected at the age of 11. So they go through
point, isn't it?
It is
a fair
look,
point.
let me
make these life-changing decisions at the age of 10.
I've just made
Does
that,
strike
but
some
I've
people.
just made that point. I was a late developer. If I'd have taken the test at 12 or 13, I'd probably passed. That's what happens in life, because particularly boys mature later than girls do. One of the reasons I'm a great supporter, I'm actually almost unique in Kent, in as much that I've got a constituency in which 40% of my population are in a comprehensive area. They're not in a selective area, because the Isle of Sheppey back in 1973 was turned into a comprehensive system. So I've got 40% of my constituents are living in a comprehensive system. And it seems to me that there cannot be, it can't be a coincidence that the secondary education on Sheppey since 1973 has lagged far behind the secondary education in Sittingbourne. And I think that has got something to do.
Well,
and more
I can see Roger chumping.
more important. No, but can I just finish it?
Yes,
because the children on Sheppey who wanted to go to grammar school were able to go to grammar school once they passed the 11th class, but they had to travel to Sittingbourne to do that, and their parents had to pay their fares to get there. And so poor youngsters on Sheppey who could go to grammar school weren't able to get so.
Valid point, isn't it? I mean, Kent County Council's looking at ways
clearly
to help transport costs.
The setup in Sheppey is not a genuine comprehensive one. Once the transfer of children from the Isle of Sheppey to Sittingbourne started, it's quite clear that the secondary education on the Isle of Sheppey was going to struggle. As it struggled, more and more people want to go to Sittingbourne, causing quite a lot of chaos on the way. I just don't think that's the answer. Now, as you showed on the clip, you had Lucy Powell talking about.
Well, let's hear what Lucy Powell had to say then quickly, if we can, because she is touching on this
Kent
particular
and
issue.
Medway, poorer children lag behind, whilst richer children move ahead, and the losses at the bottom are much larger than the gains at the top. This pattern is a feature of selective of areas in England as a whole. Let's compare fully selective Kent to comprehensive London. Free school meal eligible pupils in Kent achieve just 27% 5 good GCSEs, while the national figure is 33%, and it's 45% in London. So I have to ask the government yet again, why not focus on sharing the good practice of London rather than spreading the poorer practice of Kent?
Gordon Henderson, there is some evidence or suggestion that selection isn't the best way forward, lots of statistical evidence and expert evidence. And in fact, Kent County Council's own Education Director, Patrick Leeson, says the attainment gap is between those on free school meals and those who are not is too wide in Kent.
It is, but I'm not sure that's a true measure, to be honest. I think the answer has to be this. All the time, the majority of parents in Kent want grammar schools, and there's no evidence that they don't. They carry on. The parents out there
they want grammar schools, but they
schools.
don't want secondary modern schools, do they?
Well, I'm a great believer in secondary moderns. We in Sittingbourne, I'm lucky. I've got 2 very good grammar schools, and I've got 3 very good high schools. We're lucky, but there are lots of communities that don't have that. Like I've got Sheppey that has a high school that isn't as good as those on the mainland. So, look, I think there are other questions that need to be asked rather than whether we want grammar schools or not.
Roger, a quick final point on this.
Well, we aren't actually talking about changing Kent, are we? The reality is that Kent will continue to have grammar schools, unfortunately from the Labour point of view, but we don't actually see that changing. But what the Prime Minister is talking about is a whole national change, and I don't think she's serious about it, because the degree of disruption that would occur in other local authorities and the cost of it, of going back to grammar schools and secondary moderns, there's so many more important things to do.
Okay, well, a lot of those important things will no doubt get discussed in the future months, but we'll have to end that particular discussion now. Now, when people went to the polls in June and voted for a Brexit, many believed that our MPs would bow to the voice of the people. But as with most things connected with Europe, it has proved not quite as simple as that, with a court ruling that when it comes to triggering Article 50 of any deal, it has to be signed off by MPs. Some say this is all part of an agenda by the Remain camp to rerun the referendum. Boglarka Costellini went to Sheppey to find out what people thought.
The High Court ruled last Thursday that Parliament should have a say before the UK invokes Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty. The government is appealing in December, but the court's decision was not well received by everybody. We asked the people of Sheppey about their opinion on the ruling.
I think that the Parliament should have nothing to do with it whatsoever. The people have voted and we said what we want, and that's why we put them there. And if they can't do it, move over and somebody else will have a try. Because it's the people that matter, because we vote.
People have made their decision. I don't think it should go to Parliament now. Theresa May should now move forward. She's made the decision to carry on with this, and that's what I agree with. Although I voted to remain originally, but we have to move forward.
I think the Parliament have already had their chance about voting. We've all voted in, and I'm afraid that if we keep trying to vote, eventually the government are going to say, well, that's the end of that. We're going to go back in the EU.
We've already done our vote, and that should stand for it. Not do another vote and another vote. How many more votes do you think we need to do? I think just one's enough to say yes, we want out, and yes, we want soon.
Parliament, I think. I think, to be honest, it should be reversed.
Well, Roger Truelove, clearly some frustration expressed by people in that clip there. I mean, what is the point of having MPs having a vote on this when we know what the view is and we know what the government said it's going to do?
I think there's some misunderstanding. There's no question of Parliament reversing the decision. But what was the decision? The decision was that we didn't want to be part of an ever closer union. We didn't want to be part of a federal Europe. This is what Gordon has said all through his life, that we actually wanted to restore sovereignty. Well, that will happen. But we didn't vote for economic disaster. We didn't vote to lose the benefits of the single market. We didn't vote to be out of the customs union. And it's right. It's right that the MPs should ask the government what direction of travel do they have in terms of ensuring that we keep access to the enormous economic market in Europe that is vital to a large part of our economy.
Gordon Henderson.
I think it's enormously patronising to say that the British people, and in my constituency, 62% of the people voted to leave the EU. It's patronising to say they didn't understand what they were doing. It was quite clear what the implications of leaving the EU would be. The government made that very clear in a leaflet, and it also made it clear in that leaflet that the government would abide by the decision made by the British people.
Gordon, you wouldn't buy a car without giving it a test run first, would you? So, on such a big political decision, isn't it right that we know what the terms of the deal are going to be? And
we did know. Everyone knew what the terms were. The question was, should we leave the EU? And the answer was yes.
And we all accept that.
And that's what we're going to be doing.
We all accept that.
How we actually do that, how we negotiate that, that's for the government and government ministers to decide.
So you don't want to say, suppose there comes up with a deal which you don't agree with.
Parliamentary sovereignty?
How are you going to make your position heard?
It is. The first question is, are we going to leave the EU? And that question has been answered. Yes, we are going to leave the EU. The only way we can do that is by triggering Article 50. And that's what the government is saying, not the negotiation. The government has already said, when it comes to negotiations, that will be discussed in Parliament. Parliament will have an eventual decision. It is whether we trigger Article 50. And that should be for the government to do, and it should be done now.
Why not, as in a democracy, have that debate open in the open and transparent so people can...
We don't need that debate about whether we trigger Article 50, because it's already been accepted by Roger that we will leave the EU. The only way we can do that is by triggering Article 50.
You're worried that you're going to lose a vote in the Commons?
No, I'm more than happy to have a vote. I'm more than happy to have a vote, because actually I think we will, and I actually think we will have a vote. I think we will have to have a vote because the court has ruled that we will have a vote, and I suspect the Supreme Court will uphold that. That's my view.
Can I ask?
Yes, of course.
Do you want us to stay in the single market? Do you want us to stay in the single market?
I want us to leave the EU.
Can you have a yes or no to do we want to stay in the single market?
If to leave the EU, we have got to leave the single market, then yes, we leave the single market.
What about the customs union?
We have to negotiate different parts of what agreements we currently have with them. Now, I believe we should leave the EU, and I believe the EU...
Agree that,
but Roger, I mean, you'll know that some people are saying there's an agenda here.
There is.
That is all about trying to frustrate the process and trying to stop the referendum result
and
being implemented.
are you both saying that the government isn't capable of dealing with that in Parliament, that they haven't got the political skills?
No, listen.
Surely they must.
Roger, I'm in Parliament. I know the way these things work, and I know full well that just down the corridor for us, there's a chamber there of unelected peers who will try and frustrate this as much as they can. I look at the MPs. I look at the MPs on the opposition benches, the Lib Dems, all 8 of them, and the Labour Party, and some on the Conservative benches, all of whom will bend over backwards to try to frustrate this.
Gordon, this court ruling is about process, isn't it? It's not about the decision. So
it's about process.
Whatever happens, you're going to get what you want, effectively.
I think we will get, if we have a vote, I think we will win that vote, because I think there are a lot of Labour MPs who will look at the majorities in their constituencies who realise that if they vote and try to frustrate the British public, they will be out on the
There's absolutely no intention of doing that. The Labour MPs will accept the vote of the British public.
So why don't we just trigger Article 50 straight away? Why do you expect us to have a vote on that?
There is a decent argument about parliamentary sovereignty, which is what you wanted wanted to get back, to actually have some idea about the strategy that the government intends to follow. And
that's nothing to do with, like, that is it's a red herring.
What, the whole of our economy is a red herring?
No, you just said, Roger, you have said that we will leave the EU. So the government has to trigger Article 50 to do that. That's the only way we can live it. Now, thereafter, I accept, there are arguments to be had about...
Okay, let's give Roger a final word on this.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think the members of Parliament are entitled to know whether the unelected Prime Minister that we've got will try and defend our economy in Europe.
Elected, by the way.
And I don't think they're being able to do that. It's not about whether we leave the European Commission or the European Parliament. It's about whether we keep access to the single market, which is so vital for our pharmaceuticals, our car industry, and most of all the City of London.
This is a debate. This is a debate that's going to go on, and unfortunately we've run out of time. As always, the clock's against us. So that's all from us here at Paul on Politics. Thanks to our guests for coming into the studio. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, you can catch up with all the latest political news in Kent by logging on to kentonline.co.uk or listening to KMFM. Have a good day. Thanks for watching.